Howdy, and welcome to episode 53 of T-Shirts and Shawls. I'm Karen, and today is Thursday, April 26th, 2018. So in the previous episode, I talked about what you can do to help support small businesses, and one of the ways, besides obviously buying stuff, is to kind of help add engagement to their social media, especially by posting comments. And I mentioned that it's because we have the Ravelry group for this podcast that very rarely are comments posted on YouTube. And that might be something that is actually kind of hurting just getting the podcast noticed by other people. So I noticed that you guys posted comments on the previous episode on YouTube, and that was really wonderful to see. Thank you very much to those of you who took the time to do that. Wally says hi. Thank you also. And I really appreciated that. And looking at the statistics, at the number of views that each episode has gotten, there are some episodes that are kind of lower on the views and some episodes that have 2 or even 3 times the views. And the previous episode is on the higher end. So it could be just because maybe there was something about the content. I mean, and it was about supporting small businesses, so maybe people were just interested in watching and listening about that. But it also very well was probably the comments that you guys posted that helped get get it kind of posted in other people's video suggestions to watch next. So I really, really appreciate that, you guys. I thank you very, very much for doing that. Also, I've noticed a lot of comments coming on Instagram as well. I'm trying to post more comments on other people's social media posts. So I think if we just kind of keep continuing to do that, we will have that rising tide thing where we're all helping each other out, and our community will only get better. So it's really exciting to actually see that happening. So timing-wise, the post about, or the episode about supporting local shops actually seemed to work out with the local yarn shop day, which was this past Saturday, April 21st. And it was the first official local yarn shop day. It was organized by TNNA, which is the National Needle Arts Association, the trade organization for needle art, so knitting, crochet, but also like cross stitch and embroidery. Hang on, Eva is right next to the camera. I'm afraid she's gonna knock it down, so I will pull her into my lap and have her say hi, because I don't think you guys get to see her quite as much as Wally. Anyway, so local yarn shop day, and there were a lot of special kind of events, special patterns that were released in conjunction with local yarn shop day. And I really enjoyed looking at Instagram especially, and following along to people's experiences, the shops that they visited, the stuff that they got, and it was really exciting. I had originally planned to visit a couple of shops on Saturday. In particular, there was a shop in Fort Worth and a shop in Dallas that I had planned to go to. But I also knew that Saturday was not a great day to do that for us, for me, for my family. But I thought that maybe I would still be able to make at least a quick trip to each of those shops. And it turns out that I did not get out of the house Saturday morning or afternoon, and did not visit the shops. And in some ways I felt guilty about that, because I thought, I just talked about supporting your local shops. And here I am not going out on local yarn shop day. Since this is the t-shirt section, I'll explain while I'm wearing this shirt and why I did not go. But also just want to encourage you guys, it was fantastic to see everyone's excitement about local yarn shop day. But remember that we need to continue supporting our shops year round, not just for one day. So that kind of made me feel better. Okay, as long as I make sure that I'm going to the shops, several times throughout the year, then that, even if I didn't make it out on the one specific local yarn shop day, I'm still supporting my shops. So I will go out and visit those shops soon. Anyway, so what was I doing instead? So April 21st is Aggie Muster. So Aggie for Texas A&M University, which is my alma mater. That was where I got my undergraduate degree. Even though the shirt says 2006, I'm class of 99, although I actually graduated early in 98. But I'm class of 99. And then I went back a few years later and did my master's also at A&M. And there, I'm technically class of 2003, but I really feel strongly that I'm class of 99. That it was my undergraduate time at A&M rather than the master's. Anyway, so the 2006, I was actually already up in Indiana doing my PhD at Purdue, and my brother-in-law was still living in College Station, where Texas A&M is, and he got shirts for my husband and for me. So that's why I have this shirt, and why it says 2006 and not something earlier when I was actually at the school. Anyway, that's not the important part. The important part, Aggie Muster. So what Muster is, so first of all, A&M is a very tradition-rich school. And one of the traditions that I feel is the most kind of powerful tradition is muster. So it is one day a year where all Aggies around the world are supposed to gather together. So finding other Aggies that are also in your area. There are usually A&M clubs. So for example, there's a Dallas A&M club. And depending on where you live, there might be an A&M club nearby. And they're all over the world, not just in the United States or even just in Texas. So they usually have a formal gathering for muster, and then a lot of times there are informal musters. But at the formal muster, basically what they do is there's usually dinner. Sometimes it is like a barbecue, and sometimes it's something a little more formal. And there's usually a speaker, and then the actual kind of muster, what I think of as muster happens, and that is the roll call. And what happens during the roll call is that they read out the names of all the Aggies who have died over the past year since the previous muster. And someone in attendance, usually a family member or friend or a volunteer, if a family or friend is not able to be there, will answer here for that person. And the names are all spread out at the different locations, rather than all at main campus, because there are unfortunately a lot of names that need to be read each year. I think this year altogether there were like 1,600 names. So anyway, so they're spread out at the different locations. And I've always thought that muster was just a really powerful event and tradition. And as morbid as this may sound, it's kind of comforting in a way to know that someday after I leave this world, that the following April 21st, my name will be read and someone will say here for me. Hopefully that is far in the future, much far away, April 21st. But anyway, but that's kind of comforting in a way. But muster, as much as I have thought just how wonderfully sad, but still, you know, was a powerful tradition is, it's never really been personal, but unfortunately this muster was personal. Last summer, and it actually was just a little bit before Houston Fiberfest, my husband's cousin, who is also an Aggie, unexpectedly died. So it's definitely been something that my husband has struggled with for the past year, and I know that muster is definitely something that was going to be very difficult on him, and I thought that I would probably find it a difficult day as well, but I knew that he in particular would be having a hard day. So I didn't really feel like it was appropriate for me to leave him that day and go off to yarn shops. So that's one of the reasons I stayed home But I also, I guess, didn't I really thought that I was going to be there to help support my husband. I didn't realize quite how much I would be affected by it, and I found myself, I found myself very powerfully moved. In particular, because, and I don't know why this happened, but for some reason, the main campus decided to read off every single name. In a morning sunrise ceremony. So not the usual official evening muster, but they did a morning sunrise ceremony starting at sunrise. And they had volunteer faculty, staff, and students read off every single name, and then another volunteer group would respond with here. And they did it by order of class year, so I didn't catch the very beginning of it, so I'm not sure what the earliest class year was, and then all the way up through much more recent years. And I found out about this completely by accident. That morning, Saturday morning, I was looking around, I was reading my husband's cousin's page on the website that shared information about him. And I just started kind of reading some Facebook posts and other things on about Aggie Muster. And that's when I discovered that they were doing this sunrise ceremony that had not been done before. And so I was able to find out about it in time to get my husband and his mom and his aunt to also be able to listen to it. And we were able to hear them read off his cousin's name. And I have to admit that just, I knew it was going to be a hard day, but that just really, I guess, in a lot of ways, because this cousin lived in Florida, and we hadn't really, my husband talked to him on the phone and through text messages quite a bit, but I hadn't really, dealt much day to day with him. And so in a lot of ways, it's just kind of felt like, he's still in Florida. And just kind of hearing his name then really, really brought it home. So anyway, long story short, I stayed home that day, just, focused on family. So that is what I did on April 21st instead of Local Yarn Shop Day. So the other part of the very emotional past 2 weeks was the actual official closing of the Knitting Fairy, so the final day. So before the final day, the week before, I think it was on the Friday, I went to the shop to see if there was anything that I wanted to take home with me, and I did find some yarn. And also some fixtures, some things for display that I will be using in my booth. But for most of the yarn, first of all, people had come in, I think the Wednesday and Thursday, and a lot of stuff was gone. But I was able to find this pretty purple yarn, which is actually silk, and it's I just felt, especially with the purple, that it needed to come home with me. No idea what it might become. It might actually become a prize on the podcast. I do have the 2-year anniversary of the podcast coming up, so I'm kind of thinking about what to do to celebrate that. So perhaps this will become a prize. Perhaps I will find something to do with it. I'm not sure yet. And then that weekend, so this was the 14th, that Saturday, or the 13th, so Friday the 13th is when I went, and then the 14th was a Saturday, and I was not able to go that day to the Knitting Fairy, and there was a pop-up trunk show from Safroni, so Allison, and she had all of her yarns there, and my friend Alyssa asked me if there was anything that, oh, I've already got the yarn down here that you can see, if there was anything that I might be interested in. And so she showed me this skein. So mostly pink, and then lots of little speckles and some larger areas of purple. And then this purple solid that was next to it that I thought these two went together really well. This colorway is called Melted Popsicle, which I thought was really fun. And then this is Fairy Magic, which is actually the same purple as the one that I got at Fiberfest. But I mean, really, can you ever have too much purple? Maybe for you can. Wally, we're trying to look at yarn. At least get, oh, hang on just a second. Okay, now he's going off. Anyway, so I thought these two looked really nice together, and I think what I'm going to do is a pattern called Lambton Panes. It has kind of one main color, and I think it uses a gradient in the example. And then it has kind of slips, I believe it's slip stitch cables in a more solid color to create this really neat pattern. So I'm pretty sure that is what I am going to do with this yarn. Haven't cast on yet, but hopefully soon. So I got that. Actually my friend got that for me. And then also the Friday that I went, the Into the Wool fiber retreat that I'm going to, there are lots of knit-alongs and crochet-alongs and kind of events leading up to the retreat. And one of the things is a knitting hats for the NICU, and so for preemies, and they need to use acrylic yarn, which I really don't have in my stash. So I asked Elisa what is any of the yarn that she still had left that might be good for making preemie baby hats, and she actually did have some yarn there that she recommended, so I got some of that. And so hopefully I will be making some preemie hats between now and September retreat. And that is what I've been stashing. I'm looking around making sure that I've got more yarn on the table, but that's for something else to show you guys in a little bit. So that's what I've been stashing. And then the Knitting Fairy, the final day was the following Thursday, which was the 19th. So last Thursday, a week ago from today. And Elisa asked me if I wanted to do a pop-up trunk show for the final day, and I did. Hang on just a second. There's a loose string in a place where Eva is standing. I was afraid she was going to run off with it. Hang on. Now she's looking at some yarn. Eva apparently really wants some attention, so let's give her some attention. So I did a pop-up trunk show on the very final day of the Knitting Fairy, so I got to be there the entire day. That final Thursday, I got to see a lot of people coming in. A lot of people that stayed and did some knitting that day. So it was a very bittersweet event. Elisa is going off to some really, really wonderful things. She's already got some amazing events lined up, some teaching events. She's got patterns that she's designing, especially commissions. For example, there's an Erin Lane bag club that also includes a pattern. And in fact, she's done patterns for a lot of the Erin Lane clubs, but there's one in particular that she's working on. So she's definitely she's doing private lessons. So if you're in the local area and you would like a private lesson, then she is setting those up. So like I said, it was a really bittersweet event, but I know that she's still keeping very busy, but doesn't have the stress of having a retail shop, which is very stressful. So I'm very excited to see all the things that she's doing, and it was also really nice to be there on that final day and get to see lots of people coming through. What I'm knitting, I continue to work on my boxy, and I measured this a little while back. I took a photo on Instagram, and I am right at about 7 inches, and I think it is 16 inches that I'm supposed to knit this part to until I get to the next section, which I believe is dividing for the underarms. So I'm not quite halfway there, but almost halfway there. So the yarn, the colors are looking really, really great. This is Mad Tosh, the yarn, and I just started the second skein, actually this morning. So I just got into the second skein on that one. And that's just kind of the project that is really easy to do since it's just stockinette in the round. I can read while I'm working on it, and so that's really simple. And then I started a new project. So this is actually some more yarn that I stashed, but since I'm already using it, I didn't talk about it in the what I'm stashing section. So for our quarterly knit along, which is science-based, so any shawl that is inspired by science or math, I decided that I wanted to do one of the Anna Victoria patterns with a gradient yarn, because I really love her patterns, and especially with gradients. And I had bought a gradient yarn from Panorama Fiber at DFW Fiber Fest, and originally I was intending to use that for my Q2 shawl. But when I was looking at Anna Victoria patterns, I found one called Stargazing. And I thought that would be perfect. So stargazing, astronomy, so there's my science. But looking at the colors of the gradients that I bought at Fiberfest, I decided that just didn't really fit the theme. So Heather of Panorama posted that she had done a shop update after Fiberfest, and so I went to look and found this yarn. So starts out blue and then goes to darker blue and into black. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is absolutely perfect for stargazing. So there is her logo, Panorama. That is perfect for stargazing. I have to get that yarn. So added to my stash and immediately cast on with it. But the shawl also uses beads, and I wasn't really sure exactly which beads to use. I had several options. I had recently bought these kind of blue pearl beads, as well as some white pearl beads, and then I had some silver lined crystal beads. And so I took one of each bead and I strung it on to the blue part of the yarn, and I posted on Instagram and asked for people's thoughts about which bead worked the best. And I think that probably is the Instagram post that I've gotten the most comments on ever, because there were a lot of comments. So especially if you left a comment, thank you very much. It was very helpful. Far and away, the silver lined crystal was the clear choice. I didn't count exactly how many people voted for it, but I would say at least 3/4, if not more, of the votes were for it. I personally really liked the blue pearl, but I think that's because these beads are just really pretty, but it probably is not the best for this particular yarn and project. So I will find another project for those. But I really liked the white pearl, which the lighting is totally blowing out. I really liked the white pearl as well. So I started the shawl, and I'm mostly using the silver lined, but there are a few places where I'm adding in the white pearl, and at the very beginning I used the blue ones as kind of an accent. And you guys on Instagram, you were right, the blue ones really didn't work quite as well. I think they're fine as a little accent at the beginning, but I'm definitely glad I did not decide to use them as the overall one. So here is my progress so far. Isn't that so fun? So you can see these are the blue beads down here. They look okay, but not as fantastic as these silver line crystal. I mean, just look at how those really stand out. And then now I've got a couple of places like there where I'm using the white pearl, so a couple of little accent places. So that is my progress on stargazing so far. I have finished the first 2 charts. There are 6 charts total. So I am just starting chart 3. Chart 3 has a section of optional beads that they're not literally every other stitch, but it kind of almost feels like they are every other stitch. I mean, it is a really, really heavily beaded section. And as much as I like beads and like the way this is looking, That to me just feels a little too much for what I would really like. So especially since those are optional, I'm skipping those beads. And that's mostly just on chart 3. So, but I will continue using the little accent beads, and then there are still plenty of places to add the silver lined beads. But I'm really liking how that is coming, and I think I'm starting to get to a slightly darker blue. It's the way that Heather does her gradients is it is pretty gradual, but I'm looking forward to watching the color shift on this yarn, and as I continue working with the shawl. So I'm really loving that and how that is working out. And because I'm loving it so much, it is the project that is getting a good chunk of my attention right now. Even though I told myself and in my Facebook group that my focus was really my Let Go cardigan, because that has been on the needles for a while, and I really want to make sure that even if I'm not making like a ton of progress on it, I want to make steady progress on it. And that is true. I have been making some steady progress on it. And in fact, I am very close to finishing the main body. So turning it around this way, so there are no sleeves yet, but very close to finishing the main body. I am in the final ribbing section down here. I should have 2 more rows of ribbing and then the bind off. So that will go pretty quickly. However, I'm thinking, I haven't completely decided this yet, but I think that I want to try a tubular bind off for this, and I have not done a tubular bind off before, so it is something I'm going to have to sit down and learn, and then practice on, and then do on this. But I'm 95% sure that I want to try that. So that is something probably over the weekend I will be looking into and working on. So very close to finishing the main body, and then I go around and I pick up the stitches here to do the what do you call that? The name is escaping me right now. Bands, the neck and front bands. Just look to the pattern. So I do that, and then obviously I still need to put on the sleeves. So there's still a fair amount of work to do on this, but it is getting closer. However, when I got to the bottom hem, so I'm doing all the cables, I'm doing all the work, and I get to the bottom hem and I'm like, woo, I'm moving full steam ahead with this project. I read in the instructions. Let's see, where did it go? When you work the bottom hem, treat the collar stitches as you treated them throughout the rest of the body. This means continue to work the collar increases as you did them before. Collar increases? What collar increases? Uh-oh. So I went looking through the pattern, and way up, it's actually on the same page, but further up the page, it's got a series of 4 rows that you work without any increases, and then the next, so every, I guess, 6th row, you do some increases, and that's in this collar section here, and you can see those increases. Hopefully you can see them. You can see them happening. So here, and then you can see that's increasing there, and there's another increase coming out there. So I'm like, okay, so those are the collar increases. Well, the pattern says, continue to increase near the marker in this manner throughout the whole body. One line that apparently I skipped or I did not highlight, and between the time that I looked at that and then picked the project back up, I completely forgot about. But I did not continue to increase near the marker in this manner throughout the whole body. After the section of those increases, I stopped making them. So what does this mean? Well, so my cardigan, the section here, this ribbed section, just basically goes straight down. So you see it goes just completely straight down. There are no increases. It has not changed in size. Whereas if you look at, let me get a good picture. Whereas if you look at the pattern, you can see that there are increases. I'm trying to hold this, not have glare, and be able to point. So you can see it gets wider. So, well, glare. So it gets wider as it goes down. And that is what gives this cardigan that swingy bottom that really is kind of what drew me to the cardigan to begin with. So those increases provide that extra shaping to make the cardigan kind of go down to a slight point and to be a little bit swingy. Whereas mine just goes straight down. So here's the deal. It doesn't really affect the size of the cardigan. It is still going to be a very wearable cardigan. It is still something that is going to fit me. It is just not going to be the style that the designer originally intended. So there's nothing wrong with the construction. It is still going to be a cardigan that I can use and wear. It just won't have that, to be honest, the special little something that I really liked about the cardigan, that swinginess at the bottom. However, I know myself really, really well. So I didn't figure this out until I was down here at the hem. And I stopped those increases way back up here. So basically where the underarms are. So that means in order to add the collar increases, I would have to rip all the way back. So let me really show you how much that would mean. So all of this, I would have to rip all of this back in order to add in those increases. And I would probably encourage some of you guys, if that was something that was really important to you, to go ahead, and as tough as that would be, to go ahead and rip back and to do it right. But especially since it does not affect the wearability, it just affects the way it looks. I know myself, I've put I know it's the whole sunk cost type of thing. I have put so much time into this that if I had to rip all of that back, I do not think that I would continue moving forward with this project. I think I would rip it back and I would look at all the work that I had done and I would give up. Being completely honest. If I figured it out, maybe up here and I only had, like that much to rip out, that would have been one thing. But when I'm so close to finishing the body and I've been working on this so long, and it does not affect the sizing, the wearability, I will still be able to wear this cardigan. It will still come out as a wearable cardigan. That's really the key point. If it was something that would make it so I could not wear to wear this, then that would be a completely different story. But since it still is wearable, it just affects the style of the cardigan. I decided to just keep on, be sad about not having the little swingy increases down there, but it will still be something that I wear and enjoy. So yeah, there's my fun story about making sure you read the pattern. And if there are instructions like that, you should probably highlight it. I think if I had really seen that, I should never think, oh, I will remember to do that. Because I am not going to remember to do that. I need to make myself a note. I need to highlight it. And if I'd done that, then I probably would have remembered to do those increases. And this would be a very different story. But that's what I have. Again, I'll still be able to wear the cardigan. I will still enjoy it. It's just disappointing that it won't have that swingy styling that I really liked about it. I was going to save this for the what I'm dyeing section because it is some self-striping yarn that I have, that I just released a new colorway, but I realized that I wanted to talk about the needles that I'm using to knit these, so I'm actually going to talk about this in the what I'm knitting section. So the other thing that I'm knitting is a sample sock. So this is Brand the Blessed, a colorway that I just released this week. But really what I wanted to mention on this particular project are the needles that I'm using. So I finally got a set of the Aggie, what are they called? The bendy needles. I don't remember. I will look that up or else hopefully remember. Maybe I'll put this on the screen. So basically these are needles that look like they're double point needles, but they have the bend in the middle. and that way you can use just 3 needles. So you have your working sock or any other small circumference project. You only need 3 of these needles instead of, like with double pointed needles, I use a set of 5. So the bend in the needle allows you to just use 2. So it's kind of a cross between double pointed needles and either the magic loop or the 2 circulars method. And these were out of stock for a really long time, and I finally got mine right before DFW Fiberfest. And then it turns out that at least one of the booths at Fiberfest had some of these. But I waited for quite a while to get mine. I had ordered them online. Anyway, so these also, besides having the bend in the middle, they have 2 different ends. So I'm not sure if you can, how clearly you can see that, but this is a much pointier, sharper end, and this is the slightly duller, less sharp end, and you can kind of maybe see the difference in the tapers, that this taper is longer, so it narrows, and then this taper is shorter and it doesn't narrow quite as much. So depending upon which end, which kind of point you like knitting with, you do have to kind of be careful as you're working with these needles that you start working with that end. Before I got kind of into a rhythm of using these needles, I wasn't paying quite as much attention, and I found myself using the blunter ends. I really like sharp needles. I like sharp tips, so it was disappointing, you know, when I would get a couple of stitches in and realize, oh, I have the wrong end. But fortunately, you know, you get through that set of stitches pretty quickly, and then you can just turn it around and use the other end the next time. So my thoughts on using these needles. So if you've watched the podcast, you may have noticed that usually I do all my socks on double pointed needles. That is just my preferred sock method. So how do these compare, especially to double pointed needles? I will say that in the beginning, so when I was doing the ribbed cuff, I found them a little bit awkward, and sometimes just the beginning of a small circumference project until you get some stitches kind of on the needles and get a little bit of weight into your fabric. Even with double points, it can be a little bit awkward. So at first I found them a little awkward, and then once I really got into the stockinette and got into a rhythm, I found them to be pretty easy to use. That they went a little bit faster than using DPNs, because instead of having to switch, so I do 64 stitches on my socks. So on DPNs, I have 16 stitches per needle. So instead of using, having to swap needles every 16 inches, or 16 stitches, I could do 32 stitches before I had to move to the next needle. So I think that kind of helped a little bit with the speed of knitting the sock. And then I came to the heel, and I had been thinking about the heel for quite a while, like, okay, how is this going to work on the heel with these stitches? And probably those of you who do magic loop or the 2 circular method and who are used to having, you know, half of your stitches on each needle, and doing your heel that way, maybe this wouldn't be as potentially confusing or challenging to you. But as someone who does DPNs, and I usually have the stitches divided a little bit differently, I did find a few challenges on the heel. So first of all, I do a heel flap and heel turn and gusset. And the heel flap itself was easy because they were already divided. Since I'm using half the stitches for the heel flap, they were already divided. So I was just able to work back and forth on the one needle and leave the other stitches in the front, just ignore them. So that was really easy. So the heel flap and turn were great. And then I got to picking up the gusset stitches. And I realized that when I use DPNs, I almost need an extra DPN just for the way that I pick up my gusset stitches and how I place them on the needles. I usually figure out how to do it without having to go get an extra DPN, but I have kind of my routine, I guess, for how I pick up the gusset stitches and which needle they go onto. And so as I was doing this, I thought, okay, which needles do I put which gusset stitches where? So at first I started, so let's see if I'm picking up the gusset stitches. So I started knitting across the bottom, and then I picked up this side of the gusset stitches. So I had the bottom stitches and that side gusset on this needle, and then I thought, okay, now what do I do? So I went ahead and just left those on that needle and moved to the new needle to knit the top stitches, so the top of the foot. And then I got to the other side of that, and I had one needle that had the top of the foot stitches, one needle that had the heel plus the one gusset, and one needle that was empty. Where was I going to put those last gusset stitches? I really wasn't sure. I didn't know exactly what to do. So at first I continued on using the needle that had the top of the foot stitches, and I picked up those 16 gusset stitches with that needle. And then I realized that was going to pose a problem, because when I wanted to decrease for the gusset stitches, then usually I know that when I get to the end of this needle, that's when I do on this side, knit one, and then the slip knit to do the decrease there. And so I thought, well, if there's no end of the needle, because again, those stitches were all on the same needle, I'm going to have to put a stitch marker there or something that's going to tell me that when to do that decrease. And I thought, no, there's got to be a better way to do this. Like I said, again, if you're used to magic loop or the 2 circulars, you probably do it this way. I realized that I should have one needle be just the top of the foot, and the other needle be all of the gusset stitches plus the heel section. So that is what I did. It involved a lot of moving stitches around back and forth on different needles until I finally got that set up. But that is how I finally have this set up. So you can kind of see I'm still decreasing the gusset stitches. So I've got a lot of stitches that are on this needle right here. And that is proving a little bit of a challenge for these flexi flips. That is what they're called, Aggie flexi flips. It's proving a little bit of a challenge for these because that's a lot of stitches on that needle. And when I am knitting the top of the foot, it's a little bit awkward just how the various stitches are divided and set up. So I will say that knitting the leg, and then once I get past the gusset stitches, knitting the foot are just really great on these needles. I'm finding that to be fun. Doing the gusset stitches on the heel was a little bit of a challenge. Now that I have a better idea of what I'm doing, it should go better next time. But it's also a challenge to have that many stitches on this type of needle. So would I recommend these? Especially if you are a sock knitter, I think it's always good to try out different methods of needles and of knitting socks. So I think they're definitely worthwhile trying out. If you are able to find them, a lot of stores still are sold out because they have proven to be pretty popular. So I definitely say give them a try, see what you think. Don't give up at the very beginning, because like I said, it was a little awkward to get it adjusted, and there was a point where I was like, oh, I don't know if these are for me, maybe I should just give up. And I was actually thinking of you guys. I was like, nope, if I want to talk about these on the podcast and give kind of a fair review of these, I need to do more than just, you know, like an inch of a ribbed cuff. So I persisted, so that way I could tell you guys more about it. So yes, I think that if you are especially a sock knitter, give these a try and see what you think. I have a knitting book review for you guys this time. So I guess it was last year, Cece and Dami published a book of patterns. I think they were almost all sock patterns, and I reviewed that book on the podcast, and they have just released their next book. And this book is called Tickled Pink, which I really love the little drawings there. It has 8 pink-tastic patterns, is what it says. And it actually is a book that is just releasing today, so April 26, 2018, if you are watching this today. So it is fresh off the presses, and is currently now finally available. So good timing. And I will also be doing a giveaway for an ebook copy of this book, so I'll tell you about that at the end after I go through my review. So 8 patterns. Some of them are a very bright pink and some of them are a more subdued type of pink. So the table of contents will give us a quick overview, and these are lots of different types of patterns. So like I said, the last book was mostly socks, but this one has some variety. So there are some socks in here. So here is the table of contents. So you've got a gradient sock and then a patterned sock down there. And then there's a hat and a shawl. And the hat says, "I believe in pink." So if you are a fan of pink, this is probably definitely a book for you. There are 2 more sock patterns. So they do specialize in sock patterns. So it is not a surprise that there are several sock patterns in the book. So 2 more sock patterns there, and then a cowl and another shawl. So before I go a little bit into some of the patterns and my thoughts on this, I want to share my favorite picture out of the book. So this is a mother-daughter team. They actually have their own podcast, the Geeky Girls Knit podcast, which they've been doing for quite some time. And so it's really great to see their bond. This picture. Isn't that awesome? That's just such a great picture. So fantastic picture of the 2 of them. And I think that, the patterns are really nice, but honestly, I think that picture is kind of my favorite part of this book. Okay, so the patterns. You've got the easy peasy 6-color gradient socks. So the idea here is that if you have a gradient set that you've bought, mini skeins that you really don't know what to do with, you could knit a pair of socks with them. So it's a pretty basic sock pattern, but they've really gone through and explained each of the sections of it. So especially if you are not a very experienced sock knitter, it's a good kind of basic sock pattern. So that's what starts out the book. And then the I Believe in Pink hat. So this is a pattern that actually uses a chart, so a color work chart, and I'm not going to show you the chart because that is that's part of the pattern that I don't want to share, but it uses a color work chart. So if you are if you like doing color work, I think that this is a really great pattern for that. And again, especially if you really like pink, then it's a nice hat pattern for that. Or maybe there's someone else in your life who really likes pink. So that would be a really great design. Then there is, I'm trying to get a good picture of these socks. So it's diamonds in the mine sock. So these are socks that have this diamond stitch pattern, and I don't know how well it's going to show because it's a really pale sock. But it looks like it's a stitch pad. Well, let me just try. Oh, actually, maybe it shows up until I try to say it's showing up pretty well. So you can see it's a very textured stitch pattern of that looks like diamonds. They write their patterns, so sock patterns are written for Magic Loop. So if that is your sock method of choice, or since Magic Loop is the 2 sides, the Flexi Flips would also work really well for this. So that is what the pattern is written for. However, if you are a double pointed sock knitter, you should still be able to do these patterns. You just would have to translate, needle 1 and needle 2 to needles 1 and 2 and needles 3 and 4. If you are using 5 double pointed needles, if you are someone who uses 4 double pointed needles, so 3 and then your working needle, that might you could still do it, but that might be slightly more challenging. Anyway, so the instructions that they do in all of their patterns are really well written out and explained. They have both charts and written instructions. So I think that the actual instructions are well done. The next one is the Bashful Stripes shawl. So this one, I really love gray and pink together, and that's what they have chosen for the colors of this shawl. So you've got kind of some stripes going on, and I'm gonna, instead of showing you the pattern, here's a picture that shows you a little bit more, some of the stripes action in there. So it looks like it's garter stitch. So that might be just kind of a nice, kind of soothing pattern to work on. And then here, again, I'm trying to make the picture bigger so A, you can see it better, and B, I'm not showing the pattern. So here you can see the shape of the shawl. No, you can't because the light. Okay, so there you can see the shape of the shawl there. So I think I really like that one. Actually, the two shawls that are in this book are my two favorite patterns in the book. Probably shouldn't be a surprise since I do like to knit lots of shawls, but you know. Anyway, so the next pattern is a sock pattern, and this is one that I think the stitch pattern on the sock is pretty nice. But to be honest, the colors in the yarn, I think, take away from the stitch pattern, and you really can't see exactly what is going on there. I think there's a lot more going on in the stitch pattern than you can really tell based upon just the colors in the yarn. So the description says, this sock has lace panels of blooming thistles interspersed with garter ridges that represent the fields of green grass where thistles are typically found. And I find it really challenging in this yarn to be able to see that. So I think that the stitch pattern looks really nice, but that's a little more difficult to see. I think that'll be something that as projects are added to Ravelry and people are using maybe a more solid colored yarn, I think that we'll be able to see the stitch pattern a lot better with that one. So the next pattern in the book is a cowl, and it looks like this is a cowl that uses slip stitches to create the color work section, so basically mosaic knitting. So here is a picture of the cowl, and this one, she says, is the Alba cowl, which is the Scottish Gaelic word for Scotland. Scotland is home to the beautiful and dangerous thistle, crisp autumn mornings, and jewel-toned sunrises and sunsets. So it kind of takes all that into the slip stitch design, almost looking like a field of thistles when completed. So I do think that that's, so here's some more pictures so you can kind of see, oops, I'm showing part of the pattern. There's a picture that you can see a little bit more of how the stitch pattern itself works. So the next one is a sock, and this one I think really appeals to my my nature of really liking cables. So it has kind of this thinner cable, kind of like a chain link type of thing almost, on the top of the foot, and then you have this other type of cable back here, and it looks like, I can't tell from the pictures if that's the same cable that goes all the way across the back or if it's on the side and there's something different on the back. I'm looking to see if there's a different, yeah, so there's not like a picture of the back of the sock. So I think it's that same kind of braided cable that's on this kind of the side, the back, and then the other side, based upon the charts that I'm seeing. That I think, yeah, because there are only two charts. So one for that main kind of chain link stitch pattern and one for the other braided cable. So that's what it looks like. So that that's a nice sock pattern, I think, especially if you like cables. And then there is the Sea and Sky wrap, and I think this one is probably my favorite pattern in the book. I just really like the waves that are in that stitch pattern, both the waves, kind of the larger waves in between the two different stitches, and then the waves that are found within that section. So just waves and waves and waves. I just really like the way that looks. And in fact, that's what the description says. In this wrap, ocean waves and clouds meet multiple times to give you the sense of wrapping yourself in the warmth of a beach sunset. So yeah, I really like the way that all of the waves work out in that one. So I think that is my favorite pattern in the book. So those are the 8 patterns. Again, this is a mother-daughter team of both designers, and then they also have their podcast. So if you have not checked out the Geeky Girls Knits podcast, it is a fun podcast, especially to see the interaction between the two of them. And I think that there are some, especially if you're a sock knitter, there's some great sock patterns in there. And if you like the shawls, like I said, both of the shawls, those were my 2 favorites out of the book. And then if you love pink, or you have someone who really likes pink, that hat that says "I believe in pink," I think is definitely great. And then that cowl with the slip stitches. So I mean, this got a really nice variety of patterns, and even within the socks, there's a nice variety of stitch patterns in with those. So it is a fun book, and if you would like to win a copy of this book, so a chance to win a copy, I'm going to post a thread in the Ravelry group for the podcast. So go, and it'll be a thread specifically for the giveaway, so separate from the discussion thread for this episode. And all you need to do is go take a look at the patterns and pick your favorite. So which of these 8 patterns is your favorite pattern? Post that in the special discussion thread for this giveaway. You will have 1 week, so checking my calendar, 1 week from today is May 3rd. So you will have until the end of the day, May 3rd, 2018, to post which of these 8 patterns in this collection is your favorite. And then on that following Friday, I will use the random number generator and randomly select one of the posts, and that person will win an ebook version of this pattern collection. And if you don't want to wait, like I said, the pattern collection was just released today, so it should now be available for you to just go ahead and buy and go ahead and get started with some of these patterns. So the other thing going on in the Ravelry group is the quarterly knit along. So as I mentioned earlier, this quarter's knit along theme is any shawl that is inspired by science or math. And we're being pretty open about exactly what that means. So there is a bundle in the Ravelry group. If you have no idea for suggestions for patterns, you can go in the bundle and see some really great patterns in there, and see what you guys are already working on in the chat thread. So be sure to come over and let us know what you're working on and kind of what your progress is on that. I have 2 prizes. So this quarter's knit along, there will be 2 winners, and winners are selected out of the finished objects thread. So this quarter runs through the end of June. So you have until June 30th, the end of that day, to post your finished object. If you finished it and it's not blocked, it'll still count as a finished object as long as you get it in by the end of the day on June 30th. So in the finished object post, 2 people will be selected at random to win one of these prizes. So the first one is from Panorama Fiber Arts. So she is doing her gradient yarn as a sock blank so that you can knit gradient socks. So I saw this color, and it is called Clockwork Universe, which I thought, universe, you know, that can be science-based. So yeah, I think that counts as something that hits our theme. So this is a double knit sock blank. So there is the gradient. So you've got kind of a silvery color going out to a light brown, to a medium brown, to a darker brown. And when you unroll this, you'll see it's all one long, basically it's called a sock blank. I don't want to unroll this because I want to send this, how it looks all nice and neat here, to the next person. And I don't actually have any sock blanks in my stash, so I can't show you what it looks like. But basically when you unroll it, you will have this long tube. And then what you need to do, if you need to knit your socks 2 at a time, because this is a double knit sock blank, so that way your socks will match exactly. So you'll knit your socks 2 at a time, and you will unravel this as you go, as you knit. I once had a double sock blank that I tried to wind into cakes or balls before knitting from it. And all I ended up with, because it's a double, so there are 2 strands together, all I ended up with was a huge tangled mess. And that yarn unfortunately went in the trash because it was a nightmare. It was not a good experience. So you do need to knit your socks 2 at a time and knit from the blank. Don't try to wind this beforehand. I think your other option is if you had like friends that could help you, and one person could hold the sock blank and one person could wind one strand and the other person could wind the other strand, then possibly you could get away with being able to wind it. But really the easiest thing is just to knit directly from a sock blank. Anyway, okay, so that's prize number 1. So from Panorama Fiber Arts. And then, because of the science theme, I knew right away that I wanted to get something from Elemental Fiberworks. So I'm going to show you the tag without the yarn yet. So I knew that Elemental Fiberworks, she has science themed as her whole fiber and yarn. So I knew for sure that I wanted to get something from her as one of the giveaways. So I was looking at her website, and I saw this this yarn, and I thought, oh my gosh, that is perfect. It is called Veil Nebula. So again, we've got a science-based space theme for that. And this is a blend of merino, nylon, and stellina. So it's got some sparkle to it. So da-da-da, hopefully the sparkle shows. Look at this yarn. So it is predominantly gray, or silvery gray, and then it has these purples and blues in it. And can you see the sparkle? There, maybe you can see the sparkle there. So there's a sparkle from the stellina. When I opened up the package on this, you guys, I have to admit, there was a part of me that said, maybe I'm not gonna do this as the giveaway. Maybe this yarn needs to stay with me. I really regret not getting 2 of these, one for myself. But I think I may just go back to the website and get one for myself at some point. But wow, isn't this gorgeous? So if you want to win a chance for one of these 2 yarns, make sure you are knitting a shawl for this quarter's knit along. Post in the FO thread by the end of June, so you still have lots of time. And be entered into the giveaway for one of these 2 prizes. I'm really looking forward to seeing your shawls, and then ultimately seeing who gets that yarn. So for Roundtable Yarns, I just released the new self-striping color. I put away my sock, but this is what it looks like in the skein. So this is Brand the Blessed, and there are still skeins available on the website as of this recording. And so I'm still working on some new self-striping colors. I posted a teaser pic on Instagram that was a black and white or grayscale version of this. And because I wasn't ready to reveal the color, but I wanted to do a little bit of a teaser. And a lot of people seem to think that it was actually a black and gray self-striping. I got really excited about that, and actually seemed a little disappointed when I said actually it was a black and white picture of a, oops, the chair just bounced me down, a black and white picture of a colored yarn. So for those of you who really want a black and gray self-striping, I will say I have one in the works, since that seems to be something that you guys were interested in. That is something that I'm working on, so look for that in the future. I had wanted to talk a bit about kind of looking at the thoughts about moving to a studio space, moving out of the house. I intentionally saved this segment for the end because I thought I would kind of see how long the rest of the podcast was running and how much time I had to potentially talk about this. And I realized that, as usual, the podcast seems to be running on the longer side, and since I don't want to make it super long, I will save that conversation for a future episode. Basically, the idea is that I'm still not sure. So really, there's no development in any of those thoughts, and just kind of want to talk out some of the pros and cons and ideas. But I will talk that out later. I am working on the next yarn club. I did decide on which story I want to use, so I am in the middle of reading that story right now. So it'll still take some time because I still need to finish the story, divide it up, think about colors, dye some of those, do some experiments, and dye the colors. So it'll still be at least a month before any news about the yarn club probably comes out. But you know, I will be sure to tell you guys about that. So the thing that really I'm kind of thinking about lately is looking at my my sales numbers and looking at what has been selling and what has not been selling. And compared to last year, the Merlin, the self-striping, is not selling very well. That's not to say that it's not selling at all, but comparing it to last year, the numbers are down quite a bit. And because Merlin has been, since I started, my best-selling yarn, to have that, have sales of that drop pretty drastically, definitely affects things a lot. And especially looking at wanting to potentially move into a studio space. If I'm not, you know, if my sales are down, then I don't have enough money to be able to do that. Anyway, so the sales of the self-striping are down, and I find it's kind of puzzling because last year, yes, I did a few exclusive colorways, but as far as releasing new colorways, I only did one new release. And I'm just looking right now at sales from the beginning of the year through the end of April. So I compared 2017, beginning of the year through the end of April, to 2018, beginning of the year through the end of April. And that only includes one exclusive. I did more exclusives later in the year, the one for Houston Fiber Fest, and then a couple of the holiday colorways. So those are not currently being taken into account because I'm just comparing basically the first 4 months of the year. And compared to last year this time, sales are down. So especially because last year was kind of maintenance mode for self-striping, that I was, besides the exclusives, I was really just dyeing the colors that I had already released. And then this year I have been focusing on adding new colors. So this, I believe this one is number 6. Might be number 7. I think this is the 6th new color that I've released this year. And to have all of these new colors that I've been releasing and yet still have lower sales in the self-striping, honestly, that has me, I don't necessarily want to say concerned, but it definitely has me thinking about why is, you know, what's going on. So I thought that maybe I would ask you guys. I think that this is something that I need to get some feedback on. I need to find out what you guys are interested in, what you guys want to see, and where I should focus. Because to be 100% honest, self-striping is really, really labor intensive. And it takes me a lot of time to do these. So if the self-striping is not selling, which, by the way, by not selling, I'm not saying that like it's like sales are 0. It just is, compared to last year, real significantly down. So I'm not going to like stop doing self-striping. I still love it and I still want to do it. But lately my focus has been the self-striping. So especially with having that be the focus and then having the results not kind of match the attention I've been putting into it, has been a little disheartening. So I kind of need to know, should I step back a little bit from the self-striping? So again, not stop doing it, but maybe put less focus and attention on it, and put more focus and attention on the stuff that does seem to be going really well. So should I kind of shift my focus until perhaps maybe it's just a temporary thing, and self-striping will come back later in the year, and I can return my focus to it later? Or is it something that, yeah, just, I mean, you know, what should I be doing moving forward with the self-striping? So here are some of my thoughts. So I think what I'm going to do, no, I know what I'm going to do is put a survey in my next newsletter. So that newsletter goes out next week on Tuesday. So that is May the 1st. So Tuesday, May the 1st, my next newsletter goes out, and the survey that I put in that newsletter will be about the self-striping and just asking for honest feedback about potentially why you are not buying as much self-striping. So here are some of my thoughts for why this could be happening. Maybe you just have a ton of self-striping in your stash and you don't really need more. I have to admit that I've kind of gotten to the point a little bit of that myself. Especially with Mustache, I have quite a bit of her self-striping, and then I have self-striping from other people. And when Mustache put out the, okay, it's after DFW Fiber Fest, I have reloaded my shop. I went to her website and I looked at colors, and I had several tabs open of colors that I liked. And then I just started closing the tabs and closing them and closing them. And ultimately, I did not buy a single skein, which for me is kind of surprising. I usually buy self-striping, and I didn't. And one of my thoughts was, I have so much, especially Mustache, in my stash. Until I get through more of it, maybe I shouldn't be adding more. So since I'm feeling that myself, I realize that probably is a big factor for a lot of people. So so that is potentially one option. Another option might be not just, you know, self-striping in general. Maybe you just have, you know, so much round table yarn self-striping that you really don't need more, and you want to get some self-striping from some other dyers, which is wonderful. I want, you know, I want other dyers to be supported as well. So I'm definitely not sad if you are spending your yarn money on other dyers. So maybe you just want to get some variety and get some self-striping from some others. Totally okay. But again, you know, these are any of these reasons are helpful to me to kind of see what I might need to do and where I should kind of put my focus. So maybe that's a reason. Maybe you have a lot of self-striping and you really do want to get more self-striping, but you're kind of over socks, or maybe you're tired of knitting socks out of self-striping. And maybe what you really need is help figuring out, okay, what else can you do with self-striping besides socks? Or maybe you're just not a sock knitter and you think, man, I see all this self-striping yarn and I would love to get some, but I have no idea what I would do with it. So maybe instead of just, you know, throwing out all these colors of self-striping, maybe I should focus on helping you guys find some non-sock patterns to do. And actually, in just a minute, I have a suggestion for some. Maybe I just need to focus more energy on helping you guys match up patterns that are not socks that you could use self-striping for. So that would be helpful for me to know if that seems to be something that that you guys need. Maybe it is that you you just went to DFW Fiber Fest and spent all your yarn money, and you know now you you can't, you don't have any yarn budget money for right now. Again, something that I need to know that maybe it's, you know, it's not me, it's not my self-striping. It's something that will come back. And I just need to kind of keep going and wait for budgets to build back up. You know, just whatever your reasons are, it would be very helpful for me to know, just so I know where to turn my attention. I do not want this to feel like I am guilting anyone into making purchases. I don't want this to be a guilt type of thing. I really seriously would like to know kind of what's going on so that I can put my energy and attention into what is best going to help you guys. Because ultimately, I'll be honest, yes, this is a business. Yes, I do need to at least not be losing money on the business, but I know I'm not going to get rich by doing this. And in fact, a lot of what I want to talk about the discussion I'm tabling is about kind of the financial side of things. I will just say that not only am I not getting rich from this, I am at the point again where I am not taking any money out of the business. I stopped paying myself. But I don't want you to feel guilty about that. I just think what that means is I need to shift my focus to figuring out what you guys need, because ultimately that's really what I'm doing this for. I want you guys to have fun with the yarn and to have good experiences, and whatever I can do to help you do that, if that is more pattern suggestions or potentially going back and designing some things myself, then I just want to know what to focus on. So that's really, I don't want you guys to feel guilty. If you have not been buying self-striping, no guilt, but letting me know what your reasons are would be helpful, just so I know where to turn my attention. Okay, so if it is a matter of, I'm so tired of knitting socks, I really, really would like to do something else. There are definitely some designers who are focusing on designing things for self-striping yarn that are not socks. And one of the things, I actually should have grabbed that yarn, but I have 2 skeins of my Pavilion yarn. Pavilion is the gray, blue, purple, and green. That's not the order. I think it's gray, purple, blue, green, because the purple and the green are not next to each other. Anyway, so that's that colorway. I have 2 skeins that are damaged skeins. One of them, there's a strand that just apparently didn't get in the dye pot, so there's a white section that's like that long. So I took that out. That's unsellable. And then there was another one that had a ply that broke that I caught that also I felt made that unsellable. So I've got these 2 skeins of Pavilion, and there's a sweater called the Sock Arms sweater that basically has a more solid body. And then the sleeves are done out of self-striping yarn, so that way you take advantage of the smaller circumference, which is what works best with the self-striping yarn. And so you've got kind of a more solid body, but then you've got some really fun sleeves. So my plan is to actually use Legend in Night, which is the very, very dark charcoal gray, as the main color of the body, and then use the Pavilion self-striping as the stripes for the sleeves. So that is a project that I plan to make for myself. It is something that I actually don't want necessarily as just a sample. It's something that I actually want for myself, though I will probably take it as a sample. So that is a project I am planning on casting on soon. And it is something that you can do if you would like to use self-striping in a garment, but you don't want to do it in the body because you lose the stripes. Do it in the sleeves and then do the body in something else. So that's a good option. There is also a designer, Josh Reichs, sort of a knitter is his Ravelry name, that he's designed several shawls that use self-striping yarn, and in particular is one called Tsunami. He also has one called Typhoon, and by the way, since those are I think they are science related, Tsunami, Typhoon, weather and science, they would count for the knit along for this podcast for this quarter. So this is, I believe this one is Tsunami. So it uses a self-striping with a more solid color, and it has short rows that make use of the self-striping yarn. And actually 2 of the people in my knitting group are working on this. And it is something that I think it looks like a really fun project, and so I want to work on it myself. And I actually have a skein of this new colorway that was damaged, which is why it has a little flag that tells me this is not a sellable skein. Damaged meaning there were 2 like really rough places that I saw in the yarn. It looked like it was probably a ply that had snapped and kind of coiled down, so it just really created some sections that I didn't feel were very nice. But most of the yarn is still usable, so I can't sell it, but I can still use it. So I was thinking about, okay, so what would be a good solid color that would really go with this? And since it has the blues in it, if you look at the color wheel, the opposite color is orange. And so I was thinking, okay, I don't usually go for orange, but maybe I will do something orangey. So I dyed this, and it is not, it looks really kind of almost red on my screen. It is not quite as bright as it is showing. I'm trying to get an angle, a good angle. I don't know yet if this is quite the right orange. I've also got another orangey color that's a little paler, and maybe I should go with that instead. Like I said, on the screen, these don't look quite the same as when I'm looking at it in person. So I will probably bring this to my knitting group and get some in-person feedback on that. But that's what I'm planning on, definitely using this self-striping. I'm still working on the solid color and making that shawl. And probably that will be a booth sample. But those are some things that you could do with self-striping yarn besides socks. So that's the kind of thing. If it's a matter of, I don't know what to do with the yarn besides socks, if I just need to go out there and start suggesting patterns and making samples that do other types of things, then that's what I should focus on. So anyway, so all this boils down to kind of the what's going on and how can I best help. Because again, ultimately I want you guys to love your yarn and to use it. So whatever I can do to help you guys with that is what I want to definitely focus on. Thank you very much for watching this episode. If you feel inclined, I would really appreciate it if you would leave a comment on this episode, or at the very least on YouTube, hit the little thumbs up to show that you like the episode, but definitely enjoy reading your comments. So comment on the episode on YouTube, and then also there is the Ravelry group for the podcast, so please go over there for a more extended discussion. That's where you can really kind of chat with other viewers and take part in this quarter's knit along / crochet along, and win, show you guys the yarn again, win the possibility of, or get the possibility of winning one of these 2 prizes. So again, thank you very much for watching. If you are a new viewer, I hope you'll come back next time. And for those of you who come back each time and watch me, thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate it. And until next time, happy knitting!